Hi, I'm Paul Guppy. I am Senior Researcher for the Washington Policy Center, and this is our regular update of the issues that we're working on and the important things that are going on in Washington State that we are trying to affect in order to move us towards better governance, better policy, and basically a better environment for everyone who lives in our state. So first off is our transportation expert, Charles Prestrud. He likes nothing better than to be at home and curl up with a cup of hot chocolate to read the latest RFP contract negotiation put out by the Washington State Ferries. And this is a follow-up on an order that Governor Inslee released in 2018 that says that future Washington State ferries have to be hybrid electric. So no more diesel power, no more clean diesel, standard, reliable technology that's been around for years. The governor says, no, can't do that. He banned it with the stroke of a pen, which again is a problem with democracy from our point of view. But the result of that is that the ferry system is only now putting out, as I mentioned, the request for proposals to go to shipyards in order to provide 5 new ferries for Washington State, which are desperately needed. The ferry system has said that in order to provide full service to the people of our state, they need 26 boats to be in the fleet. Right now, they have 21 boats in the fleet, and of those, 15 are in service on reduced schedules. So here we are going into the spring, summer, heavy travel season. And once again, this year, as has been happening regularly for the past several years, the Washington State ferry system is not prepared to deliver the services that they have essentially promised to the public, in the sense that they have always argued that the ferry system is an extension of the state highway system. And when ferries don't run on time, that's essentially like saying the bridge is closed, a state highway has been closed for a certain period of time. So Washington State Ferries needs new technology. They need new boats. They don't necessarily need, from our point of view, fancy hybrid electric, unproven technology that the governor is insisting on purely because of his environmental ideological goals. Now we're seeing the practical result of that, which is 5-6 years after he issued this order, the ferry system is only now getting around to putting out a request for proposal contract. They had tried in the past. No shipyard took them up on it. It was way too expensive. And now Charles is just going through the details of what they are proposing. So what is coming up is that this will cost at least $250 million for each new boat. They do have to be hybrid electric, as I mentioned. They would carry 160 cars and 1,500 passengers per boat. So these are good-sized ferries. For the first time in 50 years, the ferry system has removed the requirement that the boats be constructed in Washington State. They have opened it up to a national competition. So there are shipyards on the Gulf Coast that can build these ferries. Maybe they will bid. One of the things that Washington State ferry shipyards point out is the cost of doing business in our state for building a boat is 25% more than it costs in places like Louisiana or other Gulf Coast states. And that's not even to mention what the competition could be if the shipbuilding were international. This is just in the United States. Even so, the bids are due next January 24th to go into the state ferry system. Contract is supposed to be signed by the end of February of next year. That's already a 3-month delay from what they had planned on, but still they're rolling ahead. And get this, the first 2 of 5 planned boats, if everything goes according to plan, would be available to the public in the spring of 2028. And that turns out to be exactly, as Charles has pointed out in his analysis, that's exactly 10 years after Governor Inslee imposed this hybrid electric requirement. There is a bill that the legislature passed not too recently. I have the number of it here. Well, I don't see it right away, but there was a legislation that was passed in the last session, 2 sessions ago rather, that we supported, and that is streamline this process. And only that adjustment by the legislature has gotten this bidding process off at all, even though it's very delayed. So we'll see how that goes. Another interesting dynamic here is we have a contested governor's race. And of course, the media runs to the Republican Dave Reichert to ask him about this. And Reichert's answer was he would be willing to go to new diesel boats, proven clean diesel technology in the short term on the way to possibly transitioning to carbon-free ferry boats in the future. But Reichert's approach seems to be more practical, and if he becomes governor, we would expect that there would be a change in this policy. We'll see how that comes out depending on what happens during the election. Next issue is something that our followers know very well, and that is Lee's expertise. Lee Finna, our education expert on the school choice movement, which Washington State is definitely lagging or behind in education reform, but that has not prevented other states from moving ahead. So just in the last week or so, the Louisiana State Legislature passed the latest universal school choice bill. The governor of that state, Jeff Landry, is expected to sign it. He's a Republican. It's a red state, and that's where reform seems to be happening most quickly. Louisiana makes 12 states that have enacted universal school choice, and there's a difference there. There are 32 states that have some form of choice that's offered to families, but universal school choice is based on, in this case of Louisiana, an education savings account, which is made available, funded by the state for any family in the state that asks for it. That's what makes it universal. Obviously, not all families do this, but for those who feel that the traditional public system is not working for them, they can get the money that's entitled for their child, goes into an education savings account. In the case of the Louisiana legislation, that can be up to $8,000 per family, and then that money can be used for any legitimate education expense, including tuition, hiring tutors, books, curriculum, testing fees, and the money is directed by the parents for the benefit of their children. And of course, it's publicly funded, so it's part of public education. As I said, they're the latest state. Other states are Florida, Ohio, Indiana, North Carolina, West Virginia. This is a fast move that's happening across the country in the last 2 or 3, 4 years. We're sure that a lot of this is driven by the experience that parents had during COVID, in which their kids were not only not allowed to go to school, but through online education, parents were beginning to see what is actually taught in the classroom, and a lot of people didn't like it. They would like to have other alternatives. The next interesting move is that Texas has been having a sharp political fight over this issue. It became a primary issue just a month or so ago in Texas. A number of rural Republicans, believe it or not, were actually defeated in the primary because they wouldn't support a universal school choice bill. Governor Greg Abbott in Texas has said that he's anxious to sign such a bill. Now that the primaries are over in Texas, it looks like a new legislature coming in is likely to be the next state to do that. The same passed universal school choice. The same is happening in Idaho. So it's an interesting dynamic where, and it's true in Washington state as well, is that there are Republicans who represent smaller communities, and they are concerned about what would happen to their 1 or 2 local public schools that they have. That's an understandable concern. A public school is an important institution in any community, but once those concerns are allayed, and particularly when parents make their voice heard, school choice turns out to be popular. The last point on that is that it's an interesting example of not only democracy in action, but also what the U.S. was set up to be from the beginning, and that is a laboratory of the states. We have 50 independent republics in a way, not fully independent, but 50 states that are governed in different ways, and they choose what proposals are best for them. What Lee expects is that going forward, we will have kind of a natural experiment going on. There will be a group of states with students who are educated through universal school choice, and in the next several years, there will be 2 different trends. Researchers will be able to study how are kids doing in the traditional states like Washington State, or the ones that have opted for universal school choice, and compare the learning outcomes, and then that will give us information about which system is best. Next issue is an update on what's going on with ballot initiatives. As again, our supporters know, there are 3 ballot initiatives that Washington Policy Center strongly supports. 2 of those have been, they're on the ballot for coming up in November. 2 of those were just endorsed by the Association of Washington Business Board, AWB Board, the largest business association in the state. And they voted to endorse Initiative 2109, an income tax ban in Washington state, and Initiative 21, the repeal of the capital gains income tax is what that one is. And the other one is Initiative 2124 that would make the long-term care program payroll tax and opt-out. I think for the business community, those are 2 obvious positive policies in terms of reducing the financial burden that the state imposes on workers. Again, Washington Policy Center research has been instrumental in advancing both of those. We were somewhat disappointed that the board didn't also endorse Initiative 2117, and that's the carbon tax repeal. Many in the business community are split on that. They decided to take a neutral position. Regarding the campaigns themselves, these three initiatives are being fought together. There aren't separate campaigns on each one. So on the pro side, Brian Haywood, who was the sponsor to get these qualified in the first place. And by the way, as many people know, Brian has already had 3 victories in the legislature. 3 of his 6 initiatives were already enacted, and these are the 3 remaining ones. Brian reports that internal polling is showing that he feels that these initiatives are in a good position. They're getting positive response from the public. He has a theme across the board, which you might hear in the coming summer, and that is vote yes to pay less on all 3 of these. And our analysis shows that that's true. The policy change would result in a lower financial burden on the people of our state. As you can imagine, a lot of money is being put in on the other side. We hear about $3 to $5 million is being spent on the no campaign. Again, they are grouping them all together, vote no on all 3. That's no side is doing the standard sort of scare mongering with the public, saying that money will be taken away from childcare, early learning programs, K-12 programs. Washington State Fact Check has already put out information showing that that's not true. The state has plenty of money, even without these new revenue sources. And we will continue to show that message. The legislature had a $3 billion surplus just recently. Each new revenue report shows that the state is gaining more money than they anticipated. If all 3 of these initiatives passed, it would have 0 impact on existing government programs. Brian Haywood had an interesting comeback to people who are attacking him. He says the no side always says that we're taking money away from children and puppies. And he points out that the state budget has increased by billions of dollars in just the last few years. So that's his response. Next is an issue which Todd Myers has been on top of. The Seattle Times put out a report saying that rooftop solar in the Northwest is practical and efficient, and that's the science shows that that's just not true. An important fact check role that Washington Policy Center plays is to push back when there are media reports that are just the data shows that they're just wrong. So there's a Seattle Times reporter, Conrad Johnson, his name is, and his article, it doesn't actually claims to report on what the cost of rooftop solar is, but when Todd read through the article, it doesn't say that. Instead, the most they say is it's cheaper than it used to be. And so what Todd points out is, well, you're not really informing the public. His analysis, which we posted online and distributed, shows that there are basically 5 mistakes or falsehood that the Seattle Times story has. One is that rooftop solar is more efficient than large solar projects. That's not true. The science shows that. The next is what I mentioned, that the article, as promised in the headline, never actually reports on what the cost of solar energy is in the Northwest. And also, the article ignores the government subsidies that come with putting up rooftop solar, so you have to factor that in. Todd says that's like lemonade stand economics. That is, the child that runs a lemonade stand reports her profits, even though the parents paid for all of the costs, and government subsidies were not counted. The other thing he pointed out is that the Seattle Times reporter used the CEO of a company that sells solar panels as the major source for the article. So there's a lack of balance there. And then lastly, it says, the article says that installing solar is the best strategy for moving to clean energy. And as Todd has pointed out, that's just not true. And of course, at Washington Policy Center, we are all about alternatives. So we provide our positive ideas about how, in this book written by Todd, about how we can move to a more efficient energy sources when rooftop solar or any kind of solar is basically doesn't work in the Northwest because of our overcast weather. And so those are the issues we're working on. We'll be tracking particularly those ballot initiatives and the governor's race and what's happening with the legislature as we get through the summer and move towards a very key election day. It's an important election, not only at the national level with the presidential race, but at the state level as well. And we'll be following that very closely. We know that the outcome of the November election will set us up for what the legislature is likely to do in January in terms of it and hopefully enacting better policy for our state. And then to wrap up is what's going on with events. So we had a very fun young professional summer social event in Seattle about a week ago, well attended. I went to it, a number of our staff did, and we had a lot of fun there. Next up for the young professionals is a speed networking event that they're holding in Spokane on June 13th. And then we're looking forward with excitement to our 2 dinners coming up in the fall in Spokane on September 20th and in Bellevue on October 25th. And we are lining up some great speakers to be on that program as well. And we'll have more information about that in the future. With that, thanks for watching.